Hello everyone. First and foremost, I would like to extend my gratitude to the organizing committee of Nightmare 26 for their invitation and to thank you all for your interest. My name is Jean-Charles Ray. I talk to you from Montreal. I am the co-founder of the GORE, the Role-Playing Research and Observation Group, and today I will be presenting on the tabletop role-playing game VHS. VHS is a tabletop role-playing game published since 2022 by the Italian publishing house Aces Games. More specifically, the game comprises several standalone boxes designed in the format of VHS cassettes. Each box corresponds to a specific subgenre, such as the slasher, sci-fi horror, or supernatural horror, to name the 3 original releases. Furthermore, each box contains a curated selection of characters, monsters, plot lines, and environments. Before delving directly into the game itself, it's necessary to establish a few theoretical concepts to provide a proper framework. Indeed, to properly contextualize VHS, one must first understand the dynamics driving the relationship between rule systems and fictional universes in role-playing games. John Peterson thus speaks of an elusive shift, bridging the war games from which tabletop RPGs derive, and the autonomous form of this medium, contrasting game people with story people. Some 15 years earlier, Olivier Caïra characterized this as a transition from the pursuit of realistic simulation to the emulation of fictional genres. It is worth recalling that while Dungeons & Dragons initially presented itself as a wargame rule supplement, by 1978, Once Upon a Time in the West moved away from rigorous simulation to better reflect the specificities of the spaghetti western. Horror has occupied a notable position in this evolution, first through the literary influence of Lovecraft, which deconstructed the ludic pursuit of victory, and subsequently through the growing influence of cinema as seen in games like Chill, which drew a strong inspiration from Hammer films and B-movies, especially Elvira, as you can see here. To better understand the intermedial transition of such influences, I will draw upon Matthew Weiss's concept of procedural adaptation. Weiss employs this term to distinguish a transposition that is embedded not only within the visual appearance or the narrative, but also within the rule system itself. This is exemplified by a game such as Clock Tower, which develops a slasher game with an aesthetic heavily influenced by Dario Argento. Concurrently, Coralie David provides an analysis of the 3 stages through which such a process unfolds in role-playing games. First, disruption of the fictional block, being a work, universe, or a genre. So disruption of the fictional block into discrete elements. Next, systematization of these elements into game mechanics. And finally, the capacity to generate novel narrative structures during gameplay from these mechanics. This is notably how Lovecraft's narratives gave rise to a characterization system that allows for the development of new and collective game narratives that remain deeply anchored in Lovecraftian archetypes. VHS is deeply rooted in this practice of procedural adaptation. Central to this is the script. The latter stems from a synthesis of cinematic codes to offer a framework structuring the game sessions, a pacing mechanism to manage horror tension, a structural armature that preserves invariance around spaces of uncertainty, where one plays to discover what will happen, and finally, the inclusion of variations specific to each subgenre, such as the escalation of violence for the slasher, a haunting system for the supernatural horror. Such a systematization of the horror genre naturally evokes the works of Vera Dica regarding the inherent ludic dimension of slasher films. Spectators are engaged in a guessing game with the film, attempting to anticipate events based on familiar codes, while the cinematic apparatus lays traps to surprise and frighten them. This dynamic is also reflected in the Last One Standing and Happy Ending rules, in which either the antagonist is preemptively defeated or only a single player character remains. At this point, active gameplay ceases and the resolution is purely narrated. There is no longer space for uncertainty or potential narrative reconfiguration, and the conventions of the genre consequently reasserts their dominance. Finally, all these actions take place within environments referred to as sets, which can adopt various configurations of tension or lethality for players. These different spatial reconstructings are rooted in generic archetypes, such as Carol Clover's Terrible Place, the killer lair, serving as the epicenter of horror. The tension between genre conventions and game activity is equally expressed in the relationships with the characters. VHS emphasizes the importance for players to adhere to the behavioral tropes of horror film characters, even when this contradicts their own survival instincts. This is a classic tabletop RPG challenge that echoes the concept of superimposed frames developed by Gary Allen Fine. Drawing on the works of Erving Goffman, Fine notes that role-playing game is anchored first in the social frame of individuals gathering together, then in the frame of players interacting with a rule system, and finally with the diegetic frame of character operating within the fiction. However, it is common for the information, interests, or concerns of the fictional characters to clash with those of the players. VHS proposes an elegant solution to this issue by specifying that players do not embody the characters directly, but rather play as actors who are embodying the characters. Thus, one might encounter John Badman as both a protagonist and an antagonist, which is an obvious nod to actor John Goodman. Although VHS frames this specific feature as purely narrative without any mechanical impact, there is some testimonies demonstrating a genuine attachment to certain fictional characters, and here the figure of the actor serves as an interface between the character within the horror diegesis and the players seeking to perform optimally in the game, thereby mitigating ludonarrative friction. This meta-diegetic dimension also unfolds through the hand over eyes rules, which corresponds to John Stavropoulos' X card, an emotional safety tool used to abruptly halt overly triggering fictional content. This is coupled with the rewind and fast forward rules, which provide contextual bonuses that can be used strategically to extract one's character from a perilous situation. While such rules are prevalent in modern tabletop RPGs, here they are overlaid with the meta cinematic agency of the VHS horror movie spectators. Players can intervene in the ludo-fictional content, just as a viewer in the intimacy of their living room might avert their eyes, rewind to review a scene, or fast forward to a more compelling one. Finally, on a material level, VHS embraces a modularity that is deeply ingrained in tabletop RPGs. While early RPGs, heavily influenced by wargames, were presented as modifiable rule systems, toolboxes to which one would add modules and kits, VHS offers recurring actors and their new roles in every box, whether they be protagonists or antagonists, along with environments divided into primary sets, secondary sets, and scenic elements. Crucially, these elements are entirely interchangeable across boxes, allowing for the creation of crossovers that serves as direct homage to immortal cinematic gems such as Dracula 3000, Hellraiser 4 Bloodline, and Freddy vs. Jason. Rather than serving merely as a toolbox for a model building hacker looking to simulate various scenarios, VHS provide the director with the casting of actors, scripts, and an array of sets, enabling them to cost effectively develop a whole series of productions squarely in the tradition of exploitation cinema. VHS is not an isolated production. On the contrary, it fits into the profoundly postmodern dynamics of consumption, deconstruction, and reappropriation of cultural content that Coralie David links fundamentally to tabletop RPGs. Without claiming to provide an exhaustive chronology since the early days of the 1970s and 1980s discussed earlier, the past 2 decades have been marked with the rich array of independent productions that appropriate various cinematic genres to experiment with their potential for mechanic innovation. Such dynamic is clearly showing no signs of losing momentum. The crowdfunding model, which is dominant today in the role-playing game industry, incentivizes smaller scale productions with progressive iterative development. From the 3 original VHS boxes, the collection continues to expand year after year with the latest wave currently undergoing crowdfunding. While this model harmonizes with the traditions inherent to the tabletop RPGs, it also benefits from a generational enthusiasm for cultural products of the late analog era, as well as the phenomena of convergent and participatory cultures extensively identified by Henry Jenkins. We thus see similar approaches unfolding in the realm of board games with Final Girl or in video games with independent micro-horror productions. A final word, I would like to take advantage of this event in the UK to put out a call. I am currently searching for the first edition of the tabletop RPG Blood for my research, and it has proven rather difficult to track down. Please do not hesitate to contact me if you have access to a copy. I look forward to engaging with you further on these topics, and I thank you all once again for your interest.